Bill Bernbach said, "If your advertising goes unnoticed, everything else is academic." David Ogilvy said, "It takes a big idea to attract the attention of consumers. Unless your advertising contains a big idea, it will pass like a ship in the night." And you've heard us say that we believe entertainment is the currency that will purchase the attention in the minds of a too busy customer. So we all agree that getting attention is important. But how do you get it? How do you keep it, more importantly? My guest today is Orlando Wood. He is the author of a book called Lemon: How the Advertising Brain Turns Sour. This past fall, he released a film called Achtung at the Effectiveness Works Global Conference, and it demonstrated how a conspicuous lack of character, place, and time could be at the root of the poor performance ad campaigns have been having over the past 10 to 15 years. He is the Chief Innovation Officer at System 1 Group, a firm that, among other things, measures the emotional content of an ad campaign, and that helps measure potential effectiveness. Now, this problem with attention didn't just occur overnight. It's been something that has been slowly growing year after year. So where did it start?
But I think you'd probably have to say that the digital world has something to do with it. We've been through enormous changes in the last 15, 20 years in how we do business. Societal changes too, by the way, but changes in technology which have led to certain things becoming easier and quicker, but at the same time leading to other perhaps unforeseen or unintended or perhaps even intended consequences, such as the speeding up of creative work. So, we used to have perhaps a few weeks to create a campaign, maybe longer, maybe months. And now it feels as though, you only have days, maybe even hours in some cases. So that speeding up of things is and you need time to sort of think and process and
study
think
and research and all the other things you got to do.
Exactly. Understand the problem, understand the what you're really trying to do and how you relate to your competitors and everything else. So it takes time to make really great work, but also I think it's led to this ability to standardize. So you only need to make one ad now if you can, across lots of geographies. And when you when you have this sort of standardized global ad, it's an ad that's supposed to work everywhere, but in fact it probably ends up working nowhere very well.
It's a good time to be in the template industry, isn't it?
Yeah, quite. And because you can't draw on those local cultural references. You can't show people talking or interacting or anywhere you show, it has to be pretty generic, so it could be sort of vaguely applicable anywhere, rather than showing people in the street in wherever, Chicago or London or wherever else it might be. So
it loses humanity, right? I mean,
it does. I mean, it's one of the things that I talk about in my more recent work in Achtung, which I made a short film for. I talk about the importance in advertising of character, incident, and place, how they hold attention, how they elicit emotional response, and how they're the sort of features that help to drive long and broad effects. And it's very difficult to find ads today. I mean, there are obviously exceptions that can be described by asking and answering those three questions. Who's involved, what happens, and where is it set? And those things sort of root us to where we are, to our surroundings. They're what make people pay attention to things. So. And this sense of longing and belonging, has sort of given way, and it's still there in the general public, but you don't see it much in advertising.
Is there a sense, Orlando, of which is the chicken and which is the egg? In other words, did the business community say, I want this fast and now, and we need to move, I don't want any creativity. I want a template that I can count on? Or did the advertising industry offer it up and say, this is an easier way for us and for you?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? I think clients have obviously embraced this fast new world. I think they've also put a lot of pressures via procurement on agencies. The big network agencies, I think, have reduced costs and try to improve efficiency and productivity, but at the same time, of course, that leads inevitably to the removal of very senior talent and experienced talent. It's a bit of both, and technology's certainly got something to do with it. But I think that there's been a broader shift in the way that in sort of habits of thinking, and I think you see this in other periods in history, and that's one of the things I do in Lemon, is I look at how this is sort of happened before.
And that's really that's an interesting part of Lemon, where you show how art has gone from this very organic and maybe incongruent feel to a very flat and symmetrical feel, and then back again.
We move from these spiral tendrils here that depict nature as it sort of is, with depth, a bit of asymmetry, and a sense of flow, towards this flattened, devitalized, symmetrical, and an emphasis on signs and symbols, the vine and the crosses. We go from mosaics of people who are talking to each other in dialogue, with depth, with light and shade, towards unilateral mosaics, communicating me at you.
Are we in a cycle? Does it come back?
Let's hope so. I mean, it normally does at some point. I think people, of course, I explain in the book why I think that is, drawing on the work of a brilliant scientist, psychiatrist, psychologist, neuropsychologist called Ian McGilchrist, who talks about the two hemispheres of the brain and how they attend to the world. And we've had this sort of misguided notion since the 60s that perhaps the left and the right brain might do different things. It's not so much they do different things, they do things differently. They're different modes of attention. The left brain's very narrow and goal-orientated, and it breaks things up into smaller parts. It likes to categorize things, categorize people. It's very explicit. Things are either truths or lies. I mean, the obsession with truths and lies and facts, at the moment is everywhere, and a sense of paranoia that we don't actually know what the truth is. Right. All of this comes with the left brain. And by the way, anger lateralizes to the left brain too. So people adopt entrenched dogmatic positions, can't see the other side. Also things because the left brain's, very rhythmic, so likes rhythm, can only really determine and discern rhythm in music. It doesn't have a sense of lived time or space or depth. The right brain is broad and vigilant, by contrast, in its attention. It sees the world as it really is, everything in context. It can understand gestures, intonation, accents, I suppose, the embodied nature of the world, and how we fill it, and it understands too lived time, space, music, and it can well believe that two opposing thoughts can be true at the same time. So it can understand metaphor, humor, all of those things that make us people, make us human.
And that's the entryway, right? I mean, that's the way you get into the brain is...
that is the way in. That is exactly right.
You bypass.
Because the right brain presents the world to us. And then the left brain tries to unpack it and then represent it back to us in a sort of simplified, flattened, ordered kind of way.
And it feels natural. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go. Please do.
It feels natural then for a business or an advertiser to say, well, let's logically lay this argument out like we're putting together a documentary or something.
Exactly. Like an engineering Meccano set or something. Yeah.
But documentaries don't persuade. That's not their job. And you are almost leaving too much in the hands of the consumer to put the pieces together and come to a conclusion.
And it assumes an inherent interest in what you've got to say. And that actually, there's another thing, the digital world has enabled us to target much better than we ever could in the past. And with that targeting and ability to target comes gradually the kind of implicit assumption that whoever's looking at this is going to be interested in this category, in this product. You can't assume that the audience's interest is a given, particularly if you're trying to draw in people from outside the people who are just in the immediate buying mode. If you're trying to look at people to grow your salience and brand beyond just that, and look for longer and broader effects, then you need to, relevance isn't enough. You have to entertain. And that's one of the things that, I think I mentioned in the book.
And you have to entertain to get that saliency. Is that a fair way to say that?
Because emotional response does three things. It orientates our attention, first of all. Secondly, it helps to put things in long-term memory, so it helps with memory encoding. And thirdly, it helps us to make a decision quickly in the future, because it promotes certain brands, makes them more salient if we've had some sort of positive experience of them, and it de-emphasizes others that we haven't had positive experiences of. So it puts you at the top of the shortlist.
You've also demonstrated a correlation between more right brain focused advertising and their effectiveness. And the IPA has also shown that advertising campaign effectiveness has been going down substantially year over year. Yeah. Is it cause and effect? Does one lead the other, or are we such a distracted society that we aren't taking time to absorb all these things coming at us?
In my view, they're certainly interlinked, and if you look at different data sets over the same time period, there's something congruent across them all. And I suppose that's that in around 2005, 2006, that sort of time period, 2007, around then. In Lemon, I say 2006, because that's what the data suggests. There was this change in, on the one hand, creative style, and on the other, this reduction in effectiveness. Wow. And I think you've also got different types of media buying as well going on in that sort of period. Everything points in the same direction, and all of these things are happening at the same time. And when you look at the relationship between what I call right brain features, characters, live time, place, all those sorts of things, and emotional response and attention, and you see that they're the things that are, driving those sort of responses in people, and they're precisely the things that have been disappearing and being replaced by rhythm and words and short, sharp cuts and abstraction and flatness.
Yeah. I see a lot of spinning mobile phones. Mobile phones like to spin.
They never really thought I'd be the boom clap, but you should never underestimate me. Raindrops and roses and whiskers and kittens, bright capricatos and rumble and mittens.
Mobile phones like to spin quite a bit.
Well, that's the other thing. There's an emphasis on things. The left brain likes things. It can't really understand people. And so there's an emphasis on things. And also there's this sort of frontality that you see a lot in advertising now, a bit like us now, looking at each other square on, almost a stare, like an adversarial stance, that advertising is taking. That is extremely off-putting. I think it's a bit of a warning sign that all is not well in the world. The collective mental psyche is going through a difficult, disorientating time.
It's like we're due for another jazz movement or something to.
Well, let's hope it's something as positive as that. And,
yeah, no kidding.
Nothing worse. Yes,
that's true. Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
We could shake the snow globe up in a different way too.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, spend a little time on those right brain features you mentioned, because I think that's really important. Place, incident, and. What was it?
Yeah, I talk about. I mean, my shorthand at the moment is character, incident, and place, because they seem to be extremely important in holding attention and generating an emotional response. They're what you might describe as storytelling, although storytelling is a bit of a wishy-washy word, if you ask me, and there's not really much. Everyone has a different interpretation of what that means. Can a building tell a story? I'm not sure it can in the traditional sense. So character, incident, place seems pretty close to me to what we mean when we're talking in audiovisual terms about a story. And that's not to mention a number of other things that I talk about in the book Lemon. So sense of lived time. Knowing glances between characters, the stuff that the right brain picks up on, that it sort of intuits these implicit and implied things, a wink, a glance, body language, facial expressions, accents, all of that stuff that's about the embodied world and how we understand each other, beyond the words. That's all very important. A sense of I talk about music in the book as well, and the importance of that, and the things have become increasingly rhythmic. So very rhythmic beats put against these very short, sharp cut, ads, as opposed to, music against an unfolding drama in a real place or somewhere that approaches the real world. It may not be exactly this world, but is of this world. I talk also in the book about the importance of characters and recurring characters, what I call fluent devices. So these, a bit like the Geico Gecko, I guess, these sort of recurring characters that are used over many years very successfully. The importance of those for recognition, for emotional response, for attention, even in digital, in-feed formats. They're very good at attracting attention and holding it, and also those sorts of the kind of human scenarios that are repeated over what we used to call a campaign. So things like Snickers, you're not you and you're hungry. That's also a fluent device. So these things really helpful at driving long and broad effects and also reducing price sensitivity. But they've been disappearing, as I show in the book.
Yeah. And what you demonstrate so well in Achtung is that this, to use an overused phrase, it's simple but not easy. It's, the things you're speaking about there are intuitively the right thing to do, not necessarily easy to create a character, to create a storyline, to create that drama in there.
Yeah.
But holy cow, it's so much more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's right, and it's much more easy to remember as well, and easier to notice, easier to remember, and actually, important kind of on another level, cultural glue that holds everything together. They're common reference points that suddenly have sort of disappeared or fallen off the map.
When you make the argument of thinking long-term, the Benetton field, long and short, you got to have both, but we're very obsessed with the short-term now. What's your go-to argument, or what is it you describe to business owners or advertisers when you say, yes, of course we need to take care of the short term, but hold on because you need to be here tomorrow as well?
Yeah, well, those longer and broader effects are ultimately more important, and they help the short-term activation advertising to work much harder, as Peter Field has shown. I point to some of the evidence in the book, Lemon, that looks at what happens over a longer time period and the relationship between extra share of voice and share of market gain. Mm-hmm. And there is this, by and large, pretty established relationship between how much you're spending relative to your size, relative to the competition, and market share growth the following year. And when you overlay on that the kind of emotional response to advertising, you get a much stronger and better explanation of market share movements in that following year. So it's like a long-term measure. We've got so many short-term measures at the moment that promote a certain kind of advertising that might drive quick web effects, but it's not going to do much more than that. Okay. And if you're looking for those longer term, that longer term growth, and investors often are, then you need to think about the kind of work that's going to generate that emotional response. It's quality, not just quantity of advertising that matters. And the quality of advertising can be reasonably well explained by some of the features I describe. And this mechanistic left brain advertising that's very rhythmic and very pretty close up to things normally. You're kind of uncomfortably close to the product that's normal, perhaps shown out of context with no real background, just bits of people and things.
Yeah, no faces.
And you don't see full faces. You see just the lips or just the eyes or just the hands. The left brain likes to break things down in smaller parts, including people. So you see that's what you see a lot of, and it's just tiring, wearing, and disengaging. To have so many things up close without any broader sense of context.
If you'd like to learn more about Orlando's work, you can go to systemonegroup.com. And to learn more about the IPA, the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, go to ipa.co.uk. And I'm Johnny Molson. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the box below, or you can send me an email, johnnymolson@wizardofads.com. And don't forget, these episodes are also a podcast that you can listen to. Just subscribe wherever you get podcasts.